Hey guys, welcome back to the PXP podcast. This is your host, Zach Wallis, and today we're going to be interviewing a good buddy of mine, Matt Greenfield. He is a local competitor shooter here for the Pro 406 series, and recently, within the past couple weeks, he just won the Pro 406 state championship, and we're going to do an interview today with him, going over all the details as far as his thoughts on the match, wind, terrain, his gun setup. And then we're going to be going over stage by stage and how it looked and how he took home that first place. So hope you guys enjoyed the episode and listen in and enjoy it. Welcome, Matt. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how's the day? How's the week?
Oh, week's good. Yeah, always fun to win.
Yeah.
So always feels good coming off a match, and of course, there's always another match on the horizon that you're getting ready for the next one.
Absolutely, man. Training lots and getting on the range and just enjoying this nice spring Montana weather right now.
Oh yeah, I mean this was such a nice match to shoot, and I shot a Lewiston match like 2 years ago, and it's just this time of year in Lewiston, it's gorgeous, it's green. Yeah, I love shooting this time of year. So.
Awesome, man. I'm excited for you. That is freaking awesome. Taking home a first place at the Montana, the Pro 406 championship. That's just, yeah, can't get any better than that, dude. Good work. Well, let's get into it, dude. I'm excited to hear about this match. I refrained myself from calling and asking questions because I want this to be the first time that I hear it. So I haven't shot, and it was in Lewistown, right?
Yeah, so this was in Lewistown, and this is my best match performance. This is my best win. Um, so about 40 shooters overall across several clubs from Montana. So Billings, Great Falls, Lewistown, Poplar, um, and Glendive, I think is where the other match,
Mm-hmm.
the other club is. And so that was the kind of the group of shooters that we were at. Um, and yeah, it was great. Weather was good. Um, a little bit of a twitchy wind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had a kind of a 6 o'clock for a lot of it, where it's kind of behind you, so you had to stay on top of that.
What was the very first thing that you thought when you got there? Like, have you shot there before this?
I've shot there one other time. I shot there 2 years ago when the Precision Rimfire Outlaws was kind of in its more infancy then,
Okay.
and that was the whole series back then, and there was about the same number of shooters as now we just have in the state.
Yeah.
And so it had a lot of similarities to that match in a lot of ways, that weather-wise, and of course it's the same range.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
That's awesome. What was your overall first thoughts when you got there? How did you feel as far as the amount of shooters that you saw? Did they do a stage brief like normal where they go over all the stages and stuff?
yeah,
You have
yeah. So they kind of did their, the normal routine. If you've been to a match, you kind of know the deal where they talk about some stuff, they get you your match books, and they'll go through a safety brief. Lewistown always does the Pledge of Allegiance, which is
awesome.
fun. It's cool to see that,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the patriotism and things like that come out of that. So that was cool. I broke off into our squads. I was in squad 5 with Shane Scott and some of the normal guys that I get to shoot
Mm-hmm.
with, but I don't normally get to shoot with all those guys in the same squad. Normally, kind of broke up, and so that was fun. It was really fun to kind of be with the Billings shooters that way.
Yeah.
And that core group of guys.
I heard Billings just tore it up too.
Yeah, I think we're definitely, of the Montana clubs, we've got probably the deepest talent pool. There's a couple of guys in Montana that weren't there, notably like Tyson Smith wasn't able to make it there, and you weren't there. So there's a couple of guys that were kind of in that top end of things that might have normally been mixing it up there at the top too.
Mm-hmm.
My goal going into it was to be top A class. That was where I wanted to
Absolutely.
be. And so I knew that I had to beat Cole Metz to get that done. It was really the guy that I knew I had to beat. Cole Metz I had to beat, the normal Billings guys, Anthony and Jake and Shane
Mhm.
and some of those guys. Um,
That's
so
great, man. That's great. Sounds like it was a good pool of good shooters there, and just an overall awesome time. How was the terrain? Describe the terrain when you get there, so our listeners can kind of paint a picture.
yeah, so Lewistown's kind of interesting that there's there is some the range almost has kind of three levels to it. There's kind of three portions of the range. There's kind of an upper, a middle, and a lower uh, square ranges there. So but the upper section, we were shooting kind of off the top of the hill down, down into kind of a draw down in there. Um, but once again, it's kind of more of a 6 o'clock, and so the wind wasn't super predictable. And then on the lower two ranges, you had kind of a square range that's kind of broke up that goes up a ravine, and so the topography of that makes that a little bit interesting in the movement. But you're shooting from under the cover, like a lot of guys are used to on a square range, where you're shooting out of the awning, so you're not getting the wind on your face there at that middle section, the way that you do up at like at the top end of the range. And then at the bottom end of the range, they've got a kind of a cowboy action pistol set up down there. So it's real cool. They got like a little mock jail and stuff that we shot out of there. Well, there's a couple of walls in there too, and so that definitely changed some things, because you're trying to figure out what the wind is going to do as you're shooting out alongside, this berm or a
Hmm.
wall. Like, well, okay, so we're going to be 30 yards out before the wind really hits this bullet,
Yep.
and what's that really going to do to your wind calls? So
It changes the whole
a
game when
lot of it,
you can't really feel the wind direction, and you have to
yeah,
rely solely on sight. You know,
yes,
instead of actually using your senses and looking around you really close, you have to it reminds me of Utah. We had the match in Utah where it was like this little cowboy town, and in the middle of the cowboy town there's a bunch of buildings and stuff that look like an old western cowboy town. And you can't and we're shooting like up, like at a, I don't know, like a 20 or 30 degree angle up into the hills from inside of this jail, and you can't feel the wind where you're at all. And I mean, the only thing that you have to rely on is, like I said, just your sight. So that makes it a lot more difficult.
yeah, there's some things about that are tricky. And at the top end of the range, you're shooting downhill
Mm.
from up top, and that's always fun. So to kind of change that shooting angle. And so there's some of that where you're really shooting downhill quite a ways, and then at the midsection, um, and like on the long range stage there, we were shooting uphill, which definitely with these light 22 bullets makes a difference on some of those
Yeah.
things. So that's always fun, um, to have that. We're generally speaking, a lot of your stuff is like a slight uphill
Hmm.
angle, because it makes backdrops really easy. And so they've definitely got some more variance there than you might see at other places.
Interesting. So so I haven't shot in Lewistown before, so it's a little bit more challenging than our typical Billings or Sheridan type of match as far as terrain wise.
Yeah, well, I think it's just different. Like you say, you're trying to make a wind call based on what you're seeing, um, instead of less on what you're feeling.
Yeah.
So I think it forces you to pay attention to mirage
Hmm.
and what vegetation is doing. And they do have some wind flags down there, because it's a pretty active use range. It's not like we're just out in the middle of nowhere. So um, there are a few wind flags out there on their square range places. So you can look out there and see what those flags are
Yeah.
doing. Um,
Super helpful.
but then trying to translate that into, okay, based on what that flag is doing, that might not be exactly where you're shooting, but at least it's downrange. What does that really dictate, and how does that translate on target?
Yes.
Um, yeah,
That reminds me of Wyoming when Shane and I went down to Compound 21 for that match up top. And it was in the woods. It was really cool. That range is phenomenal. I actually absolutely loved how that range was set up. But they would have On one of the stages, there was a barbed wire fence going like directly from our left all the way down the course. In like every 5 pulls, they had a wind flag, and it was crazy to see that the wind flag down at the 250-yard target was blowing right to left, and then the flag halfway down was blowing like left to right, and then the flag at my location was blowing right to left, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, 2 of the 3 agree with each other, so let's just roll with that one.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool, man.
No, I had one point where I'm looking at Mirage, and it's going left to right, and I've got a 6 o'clock definitely pushing on my back as I'm standing at my
Mhm.
tripod, and I'm looking at like a there's like a bag caught in a barbed wire fence out like 300 or 400 yards in front of us, and it's coming right back at me, and
Yep.
it's like, okay, so what do we have going on here? And so then you got to really pay attention and see if you can spot bullet trace, is your next thing. Like, okay, because I'm now I'm lost.
Nothing like a good, swag. Nothing like a good swag call scientific wild ass guess, right?
Mhm.
That's cool, man. Well,
Yeah.
tell the listeners what's your gun setup. What are you shooting for this match?
Okay, so full disclosure, the Precision Rimfire Outlaws does an annual Sportsman of the Year award, and I was awarded it last year. So my setup is pretty chic, and I gotta thank those guys for putting most of this together on that. So I have a Rimex Action with a Proof 26-inch contour pre-fit on it, a Trigger Tech Diamond. I have the single stage in that rifle. I use an Accutac wide base 5 Arc Mount bipod, and I have a Razor Gen 3 6 to 36 mil rad on top of that. So
Awesome.
that's my rifle. It hammers, shoots great. I was shooting Lapua long range on this match, and then for support bags, my wife stitches those ones actually. So, but very similar to like a Game Changer
Yeah.
support bag that I ran on every stage. So
That's great, man. Awesome setup for sure. Um, God, no, I when you said Lapua long range, I remember when I got my gun and I dove in down into this and saw you at the Rod and Gun Club, and you gave me a
yeah.
box of SK Match, and I ran that for a while. The shit shoots good. I mean, it was shooting fine
Mhm.
for me for the longest time. Then I finally switched over to the Lapua long range, but
Yeah.
yeah, good stuff. All right, what were the environmentals like? You talked a little bit about a wind. You said you had like a 6 o'clock wind. Um, what was the temp like? What did the environmentals look like?
So it was overcast, around 50 degrees most of the day. So I shot most of the day in a sweatshirt, peeled the sweatshirt off once or twice down to a t-shirt towards the end of the day because it was getting warmed up. The winds were fairly stiff. I would say probably an average of about 12 miles an hour. And where you're at most of the range was in kind of a variable 6 o'clock.
Hmm.
Um, so anywhere from really a 4 o'clock to like an 8 o'clock, but most of it was between that 5 and 7 range at your back.
Ugh,
So,
terrible.
um, so yeah, like temperature wise, very pleasant shooting. Wind wise, tricky.
Yeah.
And then as you're shooting through these creek bottoms and gullies, especially shooting from the uphill into the downhill sections at the top end of the course, those wind calls were tricky for sure. It was like, okay, what's going on? And a lot of that, you're trying to look and see what you think the other guys might be doing, and then see if you see which side of the plate that they're on, and trying to read that.
Hmm.
And
If they're missing what side
yeah,
of the plate?
right, yeah, exactly. Like, okay, so if I see 2 shooters in a row miss this target on the right side of the plate, um, then maybe there's something that none of us are picking up on
Hmm.
out there at that distance.
Yep.
So
Exactly. Yeah, you got to really, really pay attention. And yeah, it's tough being the first shooter of a stage. And typically everybody is the first shooter of at least one stage because we go through in order from,
Right.
1 to 8 or however many people are in it. And it's always tough when you get up to
Yeah.
the stage that you're first on and you're like, oh man, okay, well, I'm the guinea pig here. I guess we'll see, especially if it's a 6 o'clock wind or, like a 6:30 or a 7 and changing shooting angles. It can get tough.
Yeah.
Um, so let me see. You started, so you were squad 5. I'm assuming you started on stage
It was
5.
squad 5. So we started on stage 5, the barricade. Yeah.
Okay, the barricade.
Um,
Yeah, run
so,
us through, man.
so
Run us
and
through your first stage of the day.
yeah, so this was kind of like the PRS skills barricade as far as the shape of the barricade, real typical, big welded steel structure. We're shooting out from underneath the awning at the square range at the middle section of the course. And you had 5 positions and a target at 100 yards and a target at 150. And you had to alternate between those. Um, Shane was going to tripod rear it, set his bag down, went to pull the tripod in, and immediately ditched the tripod. The barricade was plenty stable. You didn't need rear support
Hmm.
for it. And so when I got up to it, I didn't bother using a tripod. Though a lot of times I would have done the same thing. I would have brought that tripod with me to see if I needed it or not. Target size was decent sized, so you really didn't need it, and the prop was just super stable. I dropped one shot on it, and there was a wind flag that I could see out there, and it did switch, and I went and I held the opposite side of the plate, and I did drop one um, on that stage, and of course that was the time stage and things like that. That was your tiebreaker. So I shot a 9 out of 10 on it. There was quite a few cleans on that one. That was my first stage, and it was like, well, that wasn't horrible.
Yeah, it's still good.
So
Dropping just one shot on any stage is phenomenal. Super good. What'd you run for your bag?
yeah, so I just ran a single support bag up front. That was my game changer clone bay that I'm running. I didn't run a pump pillow or anything like that.
Okay, and it's like a typical just PRS barricade looking thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Skill stage. Yep. Awesome. How many targets was there again?
2
Two
targets,
targets.
at one at 100 and one at 150.
Okay.
And so you had 5 positions. So you'd shoot the close one and the far one, move positions close and then far.
Did you dial or did you hold?
I did
You,
dial. I dialed
so
this
there was
one.
plenty
Yeah.
of time to dial.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a 2-minute stage. You had lots of time. Um, and I wasn't really worried about time on this one. I was trying to get all my hits, and then, um, of course, end up dropping one anyways. But you could have held over on it. I know a couple of guys did, and but I chose to dial all of them.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get lost in your reticle a little bit when you're doing holdovers. Um, I like doing holdovers when the targets are a little bit closer than that. And then you're only holding maybe half a mil or a mil instead of
Yeah.
3 and 4 mils or whatever. Good, good.
Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to work on. You know, in general, is getting uh, yeah, more fluid with the holdovers, and just, yeah, you just got to make sure that you're paying attention. So
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do if it's 3.4 and you accidentally do 2.4 on your holdover and you're like, oh, that's why I missed low.
yeah, yeah,
Easy. But if you dial, 100%. You don't even need to think about it. You just dial.
yeah.
Awesome. What did stage 2 look like for you?
So yeah, so for us, the next stage was stage
Oh, yep,
6,
that's right.
which there was a couple of logs and a wooden fence rail that you had to shoot on. This was probably my worst stage of the day. Um, I jumped up there and just screwed it up from the very get go. I didn't have my magazine in, um, so that kind of started me off on the wrong foot. It was a fairly difficult stage to start with. It was a 16 round stage, but most guys didn't get all the way through it. The high score on the day was like 10. Um, the first position was pretty low. It was off a log, and so it was just a real low position, shooting out from underneath the awning again. So the wind calls, were visual reference only,
Mhm.
basically. And there's only 2 targets out there at 73 and 117 yards, so not super far. But of course, I jumped up there, you know, And they ask me if I'm ready, and I say I'm ready, and I throw the gun down, and as I of course I'm reaching for it, I realize that there's no magazine in, so that kind of got me off on the wrong foot on that one. I shot a 7.
Mhm. Um, yeah, man, I've been there.
I think right off the gate, because after that I did a much more thorough, pre-stage check.
Yeah,
After that was my only real major mental mistake on the day was that one. So
I don't think that I go to a match and don't make at least one mental mistake. I think
yeah,
I go to every match and I do something that either costs me a point or gets in my head a little bit, Um, either forgetting to put a mag in. I guarantee you've seen me do that probably multiple times with how many matches we shoot together. Um, Forgetting to dial or shooting off the wrong barricade or out of order or something like that. There's always some sort
yeah,
of trickery in 22 matches. It seems like to where I mess up something somehow.
yeah. Well, and I think this one, was like now, and the order of targets um, was not super difficult or anything, but there was still, there's still a course of fire, and then after you make that mental mistake, to stay focused, regroup, put the magazine in, get the chamber flag out, do whatever you got to do that way to get the rifle configuration back in line,
Mm-hmm.
and then get back on your course of fire and run the stage from there on out, without having a mental mistake get worse, right? It's like you can't the whole bit, you can't miss fast enough to win, um, and to not have that get worse
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that's the big thing about
when you do make those mistakes.
100% about making mental mistakes is you want to recover from them as quickly as possible, because it seems like it's really easy to let a mental mistake get to you, especially if you have a bad stage, and then you're in your own head, um, and that can just cause a lot more problems. So it sounds like you overcame that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I did okay. There was 7 out of 16. That hurts, but you still, you gotta get what you can. And I timed out on it. Um, a lot of guys did, but I would like to think that if I would have had a magazine in, that was worth another one or two, um, shots in there, because there was a mag change at the end of that with a 16 round stage too.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome, awesome. So, okay, that's stage 6. Run us through 7.
So we actually, because it was on the middle section, and I kind of liked this actually, since the stages were kind of in groups with a couple hundred yards in between them, we actually jumped back over to stage 4, because that was at the same
Mhm.
location. And this was one I thought was an interesting one, and it was off of an incline with 5 targets that started out really close. The first one was at like 21 yards out to just shy of 150, but you couldn't do anything with the scope except for parallax.
Oh.
So, so you had to use holdovers, which gets interesting because you got to think about that when it's really close like that, right?
Mhm.
Um, at 20 yards, we have to hold over again, and so my holdover at 20 yards is like another 2/10 or something, and then to run it all the way out. And with the last one at 150 yards, um, it wasn't a particularly large target. It was a round target, but it was like 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And so, with no backdrop whatsoever,
Mm.
and no real backdrop on any of these whatsoever. So if your wind call was wrong, um, it was going to be a tough one to figure out, because you didn't have a berm out there,
Mhm.
and so you're going to have to look for where that bullet's going and see if you can pick it up if it's on either side of that, of those targets. Which, when they're close like that, they're pretty small. And when you do hit them on a target that's that small and that close, it really moves the target,
Yeah.
And so some ways, like that target, gets slapped so hard, that it's actually almost getting harder again to read the call on it. One thing I did, and you had to run this thing near to far 3 times, and I did. I ran it kind of with the parallax kind of set in the middle, at like 75 yards the first time. Because normally that's what I'll do. I'll just kind of set the parallax for the stage once, and I don't normally adjust parallax much between targets.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran it out the first time, and I got all my hits, but it was like every time I switched between targets, I had this muscle memory of wanting to reach up and touch the turret. And so it's like, well, shoot, I'll just touch the parallax every time and adjust the parallax, and then it'll kind of get that shooting flow, that muscle memory, out of my system. And that worked well. And so I adjusted the parallax on that, between targets, especially down at 20 yards, out to 150. And I do think that helped. I shot that 12 out of 15. I think Anthony had the high score with 13 out of 15. That was not, nobody cleaned that stage all day. So that was a little bit difficult. And I did borrow a pump pillow for rear support on that one. And I used my game changer style bag as front support off the edge of this. It was kind of like shooting off a rooftop a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Shooting off this incline.
With just one position.
Yep, just one position.
Nice.
But there was a mag change in there too, and it was kind of off of. It was kind of suspended with a strap, so there was a little bit of movement to it, but not very much. It was pretty stout, but it was suspended off the front corners from the ceiling of the awning.
Interesting. So what did you dial to?
Well, so that was the one we couldn't dial. That it was specific that it had to be at 0.
Oh, it had to be at 0.
Which, yeah, because otherwise I'd be tempted to be like, okay, well, can I pick a point in here and base my holdovers off of that? But it's like, no. So like, I had to hold like the last one. It was like 3.7, right? So that's not a real round number to hold. But I have to admit, and I know you, me, I think are in agreement on our reticle preference. The Vortex, was that the EBR 7 Delta? Yep. That's in the Gen 3 razors, works really good for really precise, holdovers that way. To be able to hold 3.7,
mm-hmm.
You're not like 3.5 or out to 4. Like you've got 0.2 hash marks on the vertical. So that worked. That worked well.
No, very much agree. The EBR 7D reticle just makes sense. You just really don't need to think a whole lot. There's some reticles out there where you're like, they'll have it in like 0.25 tenths, and it just like, it's easy math, but it just seems easier when everything's just in twos, and you got your 1/5 tenth mark, and everything else is in twos. Seems a lot easier. Well, that's awesome, man. That's good work for a holdover stage. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was fun. I like that actually. It's I like to see, and this match in general, you can tell there was thought process of what they were trying to stress the shooter on with every stage, more or less. And this was obviously the holdover stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, we're just gonna make you hold over all of it, and I like that.
I like how they put in there to where you couldn't dial anything; you had to leave it at 0. So there's everybody's starting from the same, because usually holdover stages, it doesn't matter. They don't tell you that you gotta leave your elevation turret at a specific value, but just leaving it at 50, that makes sense for sure. That's awesome.
Yep.
So which stage did you go from there?
All right. So then after that, we went down to the lower section of the course, and that was over to stage 7, which was off the. Actually, I'm trying to think. So 7, 8, 9, 10 were all down in the same location. I guess we started at stage 9 with that group, which was they called it the jail. And so like they've got this little mock-up building there for the action pistol guys, and it's got these windows in it with bars through it, and so you had to shoot through the windows. You had to shoot from the right window and the left window, and then go through the doorway and shoot off the back of this thing. And so, but with the windows, with the bars in them, they're real narrow, right? And so a lot of our rifles are getting pretty wide, and our bags are even wider. So with as wide as my bag is, I couldn't really put it through the bars of the window. The rifle would fit through no problem. And there were some guys that wanted to shoot off of a bipod at the third position. To me, I didn't want to try to work the bipod through the windows or any of that stuff. And so I shot it without a bipod. I just ran the thing off a forward bag all the way through. There was one target at 100 and another target at 150. And, it was just, shoot with 2 rounds and 1 round. And so the round count changed a little bit from position to position, but otherwise you're shooting near to far through that one. And 13 rounds. So there was a mag change in there. For me, I run 2 10-round magazines. The Remex Factor mags feed great in their normal configuration, and so I haven't put an extension on any of mine. So I think I shot a 8 out of 13, and so this was our first stage, moving down to a kind of different portion of the course. And so I was trying to get the wind figured out, down in this new location, and I didn't shoot it particularly well. But it was fairly difficult target size with the wind condition. And so Shane was the only guy that cleaned that stage all day. And of course he came up, a little bit after I did, and just tore it up. But for me, I had to basically set the bag kind of at the edge of the windowsill. I couldn't set it long ways. The way that I shot that. And so if I was going to go back and shoot that again, that might be what I would change. I might try to think about a better way to get the bag into the window so that I could shoot off the bag lengthwise instead of shooting off of it widthwise, and kind of having a narrow position there. So.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting stage. It reminds me of the one I was just talking about in Utah. It was the jail, and it's kind of a mixture in between the one that the stage 9 that you're just talking about, and then your holdover stage, where we had a target at 20 yards, and then we had a target at, God, I can't remember. It was 150 something, somewhere in there, and you couldn't dial or do anything. The only thing you could touch was your parallax. But then same thing, the bars in between the jail, door, I guess you'd call it, were really thin, but your gun had to go in between each one of them as you moved positions. So you had to move real quick. I think I timed out by, like 1 impact, or I made it. I can't remember, but it was really, really close.
Yeah.
Nice work. So that was stage 9.
Yeah. So stage 9, and after that we moved on to stage 10, which was the snake trap. And I haven't shot a snake since, I think the last time I was in Lewistown. I think it's been 2 years. And so the way that works is you've got a target, the round. It's like shooting like a steel pop can that's on the end of a stick that's on a buoy inside of a bucket filled full of water. And so every time you hit the thing, of course, it spins around and moves in a kind of a random fashion, depending on how you hit that target. And they're not particularly big. They're not tiny. This one wasn't. We shot it at 66 yards, and we shot it off a tank trap. And it was 5 rounds off of each tip of the tank trap and then off the yoke. And so it was 20 rounds total and 2 minutes, 4 positions, but it's all one distance. And it's basically shooting a random mover that's kind of just past your zero range. And then we were shooting along this wall, actually, that's set up down there between these pistol ranges. So it was kind of an unusual wind call, because I was like, all right, I know that I'm going to get 40 yards down this wall before it's going to be really exposed to the wind. But at that point, the wind was blowing pretty good, and it was a little more dramatic left to right at that point. So I've dialed 1/10 on the gun, like I was going to shoot a mover. And, and then I was like, well, I don't think I've got time, especially as you're kind of tracking this thing left to right, though it doesn't move a ton left to right. It's only moving, 3 feet left to right. I didn't think I could use rear support for it. I thought that'd be too slow. And so I just went with a single bag off the tips and off the yoke, um, with no rear support. And I shot that 11 out of 20. But that was based on the other guys in our squad. I knew that was okay. I think the high score on that stage for the day was like 13. So that was a tough gig, just shooting that style of target. And we don't shoot those a lot anymore, right? It kind of reminded me of the old days. Once again, because I hadn't shot one in a couple of years, of when we used to shoot kind of these moving targets and more kind of more unusual stuff, but we shot them closer, right? Because it was only at 66 yards, which on that target size normally would be a gimme. But now it's moving just enough that you got to lead it just a little bit.
Yeah, it's floating around and moving.
So that was fun. Yeah, right, and it's fun, and because it's random, right? It's not like it's going to move left or right, every time. And and then if you clip it off the edge, then it really kind of spins it around and stuff. Or if you hit it really hard, if you have a real dead center hit, well, then it'll really, start moving on you. So I know some of the guys love those things because they're kind of fun. Some of them kind of don't like them because there might be a little bit of luck involved. But it seemed like it evened out pretty good. And most of the guys in our squad shot it around a 10. The good shooters did. And I think, like I said, the high score on the day was like a 13. But after shooting an 11 on that one, I was like, ooh, that was, if somebody was really good at shooting these, if somebody could have put, 17, 18 points on, on that stage, that might have been a rough one. But as it turned out, everybody, I think everybody struggled with the same thing of wondering what the wind is going to do, because you're shooting at this thing that's 3 or 4 feet off the ground with no backdrop behind it to speak of, because it's moving. Even if you could, maybe Rain Man, you could spot what's going on out there, but the grass is 2 feet deep back behind it. So so that was tricky.
That's interesting, man. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that before. That's crazy. I've never even had the opportunity to shoot. It's called the snake trap.
Yeah, they call them a snake trap, or a snake charmer, I think is what they call those. The stage is called snake trap because it was shooting off a tank trap, but they call them a snake charmer target. And it's something I think we kind of shot early on when we first started shooting 22s, and before everybody really kind of had the ballistics figured out, and we were shooting this, NRL 22 style, everything inside of 100 yards. But it's something that overall I think most guys have gotten away from, a little bit because of the potential luck factor, I guess.
The trickery.
The trickery.
Kind of like shooting off of
that was fun.
Kind of like shooting off of a completely moving barricade that's hanging on chains. I just feel like that's like, oh man, like you just don't have control. There's no skill really involved in it. It's, I don't know. But that's awesome. Well, that's good, man. No, 11 out of 20. That's good stuff. And the high score was 13. So no, you smoked that one too. That's legit. Where did you guys go?
I didn't think that at the time. At the time, I was like, well, that's the end of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you think it's out of 20, you're like, oh crap, I just bombed that. I'm going home.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Where'd you guys head to next?
So after that was stage 7, the tire stage, and this was a KYL that you had to shoot. It was a 5-target KYL, and you just shot it 5 times, from 3 positions, so 15 rounds total. And they had a series of tires. You shot it from the left, the middle, and the right. But it wasn't your typical KYL. It was a shoot-through KYL. So you've got a big plate with the holes drilled in it, and there's a flapper behind the hole. And so you got to shoot through the hole of this thing and hit the flapper behind it, which is like, okay, that sounds easy enough. I mean, you're shooting through a hole instead of at a round target. Like there's, how much different can that be? The kicker with it is back to the wind call, that because you're shooting through the hole at a flapper, the flapper swings up because it's pretty small. Like normally on a normal KYL, you get your wind call fairly early on your big targets,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't swing as far, they don't move as much. Usually there's some paint left on them somewhere. You can kind of game it by shooting at a clean spot on the big target and try to get an initial wind call. With these, because the flapper swings up out of view, to me it was harder to read on the target where you were hitting this thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I shot it fairly well, So at that point, you're like, okay, I really got to focus and watch this round go through. And it was at 46 yards, so right at 0 point. And I did clean this one. This one went well for me. The middle position off the tires, they were flat like a car tire, and so there was some bounce to them. So the vertical on it was a little hard to control when you got down to the smaller targets. And for me, something I'm trying to do these days is like, look, if I can't get my wobble zone under control, I'm just going to make a really good trigger pull, and I'm not going to try to time it like as much. Obviously, there's still some timing involved there, but I try to really focus on still having a really good trigger pull in there.
Trust the
And so
wobble.
that seemed to work for me. I shot that clean, and that was good. And that felt good coming off of the stage prior where I shot like 11 out of 20 to turn around and go 15 for 15 was a good stage.
That's great. That's super good. So it sounds like you had a good initial wind call. You trusted that wobble, gave some good trigger squeezes, and it all worked out. And that
Yep.
was off of tires, right?
Yeah.
Was it standing, kneeling?
Kneeling off tires. Yeah, they were all fairly short.
Awesome. That's good stuff. 15 out of 15. Yeah, especially like you just said, coming off of stage 10, where 11 out of 20. Even though it's good, you probably didn't know that at the time. And you're like, oh crap.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you came through, smoked that, cleaned her. All right. What's the next stage?
Stage 8, the longer bench. So this was shooting off of a concrete bench, 100, 200, 300, 4 shots on each. And so it should have been a breeze of a stage. The 300-yard target was like a mil wide, tons of wind call, forgiveness there. And this was kind of my second mental mistake of the day. It was a right to left, and I held my first target left to right. And so I think I put 2 in the dirt at 100 yards before I realized what was going on. And it was, oh my gosh, I mixed the wind call backwards in my head. And when I did that, I stopped to like think about what the heck just happened as I'm trying to figure out, what's going on. And it was a 90-second stage where everything else on the day was 2 minutes. And so that kind of threw me off for a little bit. And so after I realized what I did, got back on the gun, correct that mistake, hold on the other side of the target this time, and start working my way out. But I did time out on that stage. And so I think that was a 6 out of 12. So that was my other stage of the day where I was like, oof, that was not great.
But you work through it.
But
you
work through it.
Yeah, that's the thing is that I've noticed when I start making a mental mistake on a stage, I feel like I could recover quicker if I just stop what I'm doing and just slow down my thought process and not try to rush, figure out what the issue is, and then push through. So
right.
That's what I've found seems the best. But if I'm going too fast and I'm trying to quickly resolve my issue as absolute fast as I can, I feel like I just make more mental mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, that's all right, man. I've
Absolutely.
been there God knows how many times shooting on the wrong side of the target, especially shooting here in Billings when we go and train. It's always a left to right, always left to right.
Yep.
And you go somewhere else and you're like, oh shit, this is a right to left. Okay, let's it's like
no, and when I came off the stage, everybody else, in our squad knew exactly what happened.
Yep.
Because we, all the Billings guys that used to shoot left to rights, like you held that right to, left to right instead of right to left. I'm like, that's exactly what I did. So.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we don't have the luxury of getting all these, different sort of winds all the time here. It's straight up left to right, like anywhere
Yeah.
between like a 7 and a 10 o'clock wind.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
Oh, that's great.
Pretty much.
That's cool. All right, man.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
So after that, we went up to the upper section of the course, and so there was stage one was the high house, and so there's a set of stairs that goes up on the side of this little building. I think it's like a trap house, and so go up a set of stairs, and there was 3 positions there and 4 targets you had to shoot from each position, and you shot them like near to far, and then the second position was kind of random order that you had to remember or get down on your dope card, and then the last position was far to near. Um, I just shot this off a single bag, and we were shooting a series of I think they were. I'm trying to remember if these were IPSCs or if they were like a gopher mover. I think these were. I think they were an IPSC shape. Either way, they were taller than they were wide, and um, so I actually ran holdovers for this one because for me it was of course the close one was like 0. And then the second one was like, 1 mil, 1.5 mil, and 2.5 mil. It lined up for me good. Um, and there was a couple of guys that were timing out,
Mhm.
on that. And so I decided to use holdovers on that, and I shot that one clean. So that was worth 12.
Oh, nice. Cleaned it
That was a
again.
good stage for me. Yeah.
Good freaking work. And that was kind of like in their version of the 5 stand that we have here.
Not quite. It was more of a platform.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So there's kind of this shed that it's kind of a 2-story shed that you're shooting off of. And so you had to go up a set of stairs on the clock and then make a position off the rail and shoot that. And I got to spot that a couple of times up top. I was on glass up top, so I think that might have helped my wind call going into that one too a little bit. I was able to watch a few shots go down, and so I had a pretty confident going in on the wind call on that one, and used holdovers and did that.
I forgot to ask you at the beginning here before, for your gun setup, what are you using for your dope card?
I use an arm card
Arm
actually.
card.
I used to run a more typical dope card up on the scope. Um, when we shot the Badlands Brawl last fall, there was some of those stages that were kind of they were kind of difficult. They were and they didn't have target markers, and so I started drawing myself a map on my arm card for where to go find all those targets in case I got lost. Um, and after that, I kind of liked the arm card again. So I've pretty much been running that since then. I can get more information on it. Maybe it slows me down a little bit. I might try to train it and practice it a little bit more to see if I'm losing time there. But I do like the big real estate. I can write big for some of the unusual target orders and things like that. I've got lots of space to put on there. Where if I was running the smaller dope card up on the scope, I felt like sometimes I didn't have enough room to get the information that I wanted on there.
And I've noticed that too. God, I can't remember what match it was that we were at, but we had it was like 5. Oh God, I can't remember. It was between 5 and 10 targets. I want to say it was closer to 10 because my e-dope card um didn't have any spots left in it. It was completely filled up, and
Right.
I got lost in the noise, man. Like going from target 1 to target 10 or whatever it was. And then trying to come back down and remembering what number target I was on. And yeah, but if you're able to write bigger, I feel like that it's easier to pick up, easier to see. There's something said to have it on your arm there and being able to write a little bit bigger.
Yeah. So what we're talking about I run masking tape, and then I write down that stage dope on the masking tape, and then I peel it off when I'm done most of the time.
That's a good way to
And
do
I
it.
will use a different piece of tape for different positions.
Oh,
So if I have position 1, it's on its own piece of tape. If I've got position 2, it's on its own piece of tape. And and so that allows me to kind of keep that stuff separate. Because I think I remember what we're talking about. I think we shot one that had 4 targets at 4 different positions that were different yardages.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was only 4 targets downrange, but you ended up with like 12 different dopes for the thing, and that was really tough to get.
Yeah.
To keep squared away. Anyway, so that's why I'm running the arm card anyways. But yeah, so that was stage 1. That went good. Stage 2 after that, they called that the low house, because it was over by the other trap house that's shorter, and we shot that off of a gate.
Okay.
And 3 positions, 3 targets in different orders. Fairly straightforward. I ran a single bag off of that. That was 15 rounds total, and I shot that one. I dropped the last shot on that one. I choked on the last shot.
Still good.
But yeah, but that was good. Once again, that was shooting downhill off of this gate, and so one target was in the very bottom, and the next was on the face of this hill, and another target kind of off to the side. And so, I like that. I like shooting down and then having to transition and shoot, further up. That's always, to me, that's always kind of fun.
And that was you just ran the one bag.
Yep, just ran the one bag across the rail up front. No rear support, no pump pillow, no tripod.
That's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to work myself into a space, and I guess into a skill set where I could pretty much shoot every stage just with one bag. I'm really, really trying. I've definitely noticed that, like off of rooftops or when I'm really low to the ground and it's not quite prone and it's not quite kneeling, that like a rear pump pillow is definitely nice. I'd love to get to the point where I just need the one bag. It's just takes time, practice, and training, and yeah, I try to take every opportunity to do that. But that's awesome. Just one bagged it.
Yeah. Well, and once again, these targets were a little taller than they were wide,
mm-hmm.
and so normally, shooting off like a gate or something like that, normally it's the vertical, that I'm trying to control, with the rim fires.
Yep.
And so, but with this one, okay, I got a target that's, half a mil tall or something. Like I can execute that shot no problem without running a pump pillow or a tripod.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Those like leaned over positions, you get that vertical wobble that's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It's hard to control. Awesome. What's the next one?
And then last one was last stage of the day for us, stage 3, Cerebel. And that's the name of the truck. So it's a big military truck, like a 5-ton truck. And so we were shooting off of the rails and the bench in the back of the truck. And it was 3 positions with 2 targets and slightly different round count. You shot it like twice and then 3 times and then 2 and then 3. And this one was a tricky one wind-wise. This was probably one of the ones where, I looked at it for a really long time under glass, watching other guys shoot it, fairly deep in our squad, looking at Mirage and trying to figure out what was happening, and never really did get a good idea what was going on downrange. I could see the effect of it, but I couldn't read it, right? It was like, okay, like the wind call here is like half a mil left to right, but like I'm feeling like a pretty notable right to left, at the shooter. Yeah, but hopped up there, basically ran it the same way. It was kind of like running a gate stage a little bit, that the rail, is a lot like a gate. Big heavy truck, so you're not really moving it around much as you're moving. And so it was real stable. And I shot that about the same way that I shot the stage before it. I choked on the last shot. And man, you missed the last shot 2 stages in a row. Especially when you're shooting well, those guys they're gonna remind you of it. So
of course, of course they are
off the truck, and Jake's got his hands around his neck, yeah, choking and everything. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Good work. So you had multiple good stages in a row. That's awesome, and obviously took first, but that's great, man. It sounds like you
Yeah.
had a super good day, super good match. You earned it, dude. Good work. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Did you have any Rimex ejection issues by chance?
No, no, I didn't. And when I first got my Rimex, I stuffed a couple of rounds when I first
Hmm.
got it. Um, and after I kind of understood the rhythm of the action, I haven't had a problem with it since.
Okay, because
But I only run Lapua. I've never tried to run Ely through it or anything else. I ran SK and Lapua through it. Um, and I did clean it. I don't clean very often, but I did clean it going into this one because when I was shooting it earlier in the week, it took like 15 or 20 rounds to get the barrel like warmed back up and to where it was shooting good. But the first couple of groups of the day were pretty wide, and I shot like 20 or 30 rounds, and then it settled back down. I'm like, okay, I need to clean this thing. I need to get some lubricant, um, get some gunk out of it.
yep,
At least that's my theory. I don't know if that's true or not, but
stick to it.
that's my current theory on that.
Exactly.
Um,
No, I've kind of had similar I guess results with my Rimex. I hadn't had any issues at all, and then I went to Utah to that 22X match, and I started getting failure to extracts and failure to ejects right in the middle of stages, and it cost me quite a few points for sure. But um, yeah, one of the easiest stages of the day, it was just one KYL, and you were required to use a rear tripod support, but you were kind of shooting at a pretty steep incline. And God, like the three dudes that went ahead of me cleaned it, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be pretty easy. It's only at 50 yards, no dialing, no nothing, no wind, and cleaned the first position, all five. Cleaned the second position, all five, and then my very first shot on the third position, I got a failure to extract, or failure to to completely or failure to eject, and
so you got a spent case that's stuck inside the
yep,
action.
yep. And I couldn't
Yeah,
get it out. And I'm like, oh, so there went 5 points right there. And then it did it again, the exact same thing on the stage following that. And then the stage after that one, it didn't do it. But yeah, so I started kind of having these issues and I'm like, what's going on? So I threw a new extractor on there. So, but I haven't shot it since. So I guess
yeah,
we'll see what happens, but hopefully it doesn't continue to do that. I know that Rimex says that these are like what are they, consumable parts where you're pretty much required just to continue to change these out. I'm actually holding the old one in my hand right now, but
yeah.
yeah, I guess we'll see. So what did the prize table look like? Was there some good stuff there? Like walk us through that.
Yeah, so it was a pretty good price table, and the trophies were real cool. They did a random draw for the prize table on this one, but the top three overall positions, and I think top youth, and top lady, I think, um, had a small cash payout. So that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Um, the cash payout was $200 for the top spot. So I got that and the trophy, and then I walked the prize table random order. Ended up about in the middle. Um, maybe a third of the way
Hmm.
down. And so I picked, but it was a pretty good prize table. There was a tripod on it that was like a 2 beds tripod, and that went early, of course. Um, there's some pretty good certs on there for like half off a MDT chassis and a few things like that.
That's great.
I was hoping to snag that one because I want to put another ACC under my centerfire gun, but I ended up picking up a half off a proof carbon barrel.
Nice.
Is what I pulled off the price table.
You gonna
Yeah,
put that on a
so
center
I got
fire, or what are you
100%
gonna do with
OE.
it?
I don't know. So I've got a Lilja on my centerfire
Hmm.
gun that's only got like 75 rounds through it. Um, and it's hammering. TC out of Lewistown chambered that one for my uh, American Rifle coup de grace action on that one, and that it hammers. It's great. Um, so I don't 100% know. I'm tempted to do like a 6.5 PRC barrel for that
I
action.
like it.
Um, and then to kind of have a secondary, kind of hunter setup off
Yeah.
that action, because I do like that action a lot. But I also have another like older hunting rifle that I might rebarrel or something like that. Haven't decided yet. So
That's good work, man. Freaking awesome. It's always nice to go to these matches and, you pull something off the table if you do well enough to where you're like, you know what, it was worth coming. Like it was worth coming. I got a good, like in Utah, I got a new trigger, which was pretty cool. And yeah, like $350, $400 trigger. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. This is worth it, coming down here, shooting good, and getting some good quality, decent parts that can help continue our bad habit of shooting and spending a shit ton of money.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's a really neat part of our sport. I raced a little bit of motocross, late teens and early 20s, and so really, around that stuff, you had kind of it was a more split between your sponsored riders who had you know full access to
Mhm.
gear, um, and then everybody else who was out of pocket on everything. And so to see something in between in the shooting community is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And last time I was in Lewistown, I picked up a cert. It was my first like match where it really had a prize table for an AccuTac bipod, and I didn't even know what they. I was so new to the sport then. I didn't even know who AccuTac was. I had no idea.
Mhm.
I just saw the thing AccuTac, like bipod. I'm like, oh, okay, that looks, like my bipod at the time was real lightweight. It had like a Magpul or something, and so I was like, well, I like the heavy bipod, so I picked it up, and I'm still running that exact same bipod today, 3 seasons later. I'm a big fan of, um, a big fan of that. So it's cool to be able to see that.
Yeah,
And
actually,
when
like
you're starting out, to be able to go to,
win something at a match that you can continue to use, and it's yeah, 100%. That's phenomenal.
yeah, yeah.
So, okay, last but not least, I want to know what your thoughts are in here. Well, what did you take away from the match, and what's been your training routine like? So yeah, first things first. What'd you take away from it? What was a point in the match where you're like, hey, I'm gonna when I go and train, this is what I'm gonna do, or anything. The first thing that comes to your mind.
Um, when I'm writing down my win calls on my dope card, I'm going to put an arrow left to right or right to left. That's the first thing that pops in my head. I'm like, all right, I've got to put an arrow on here because especially if it's right to left. So I'm going to do that, and I need to continue to work on shooting holdovers. Because there are stages where that is an advantage, especially if it's a high round count fast
Mhm.
stage where you gotta move. Um, Normally, the target sizes on those stages are slightly more generous. So if you can get through them, like those are the stages to use holdovers on. If you got a little more generous target and you got to move a lot, if you can get that flow, um, and just use holdovers on those, then I think there's some points to be picked up um, doing that. So those are kind of my two takeaways. And then for goodness sakes, put the magazine in the rifle. Like you can't,
Oh
you got to do
man,
that. So
100%. That's a big one. I've done that. I don't know how many times. Especially, it's always like the first stage of the day for me, or my first training stage of the day for me. I'm always forgetting something. Like pre-fire check, Zach. Pre-fire checks, you idiot.
yeah,
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, maybe we should go out to the range this weekend and practice some holdovers. That sounds like a good time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So. Well, thanks. You got anything else that you want to add in here for the listeners?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think if there's anybody that's listening to this stuff that hasn't done competitive shooting, um, just go out and do it, man. Like you will learn more doing this, um, so much faster than you will trying to do it, kind of by yourself.
God,
Um,
yes. I said that on my first one.
you know, oh yeah. I mean, two things: get hooked up with a guy like you that's doing some training, um, that will explain some things in 20 minutes, or less, that will take you weeks to try to figure out.
Hmm.
And then hang out with some competitive shooters and just kind of see what they're doing and how they're doing it. That there's, and even if you aren't into the full race guns and all that stuff, like, my dad thinks that some of my rifles are ridiculous, and he's not wrong. But like, even if you come up with a basic rifle and shoot this stuff, you're going to learn so much more about the platform that you have. Just get out and do
Even
it.
if it's just one match a year, like, it's the cheapest training that you can, if you look at it as training, it's the cheapest thing that you could do to learn how to become efficient with your rifle and accurate. I mean, what is it? 50 to $75 for a typical match, and you're going to get squatted up with 4 or 5 dudes that are going to be itching to help you out because we want more shooters in the sport. You're going to be, you're going to be handed 10 different bags to use, and we're going to be helping you call wind. And yeah, so get out there, guys, and train up, blow the dust off the rifle, and come out and have some fun. So we have monthly matches in Billings here, and I'm sure they do them all over. We have them in, oh shoot, what is it now, Matt? It's Montana, Wyoming. What is it? South Dakota, Idaho. How many clubs do we have?
It's a bunch. I know we got or two in Minnesota now
Yep.
too. Um,
There's one out east too that's new, I think. They
yeah, it's more all the
think
time.
we got like 30 clubs in like 7 or 8 different states. So pretty big series. But anyways, guys, appreciate you listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast. Would very much appreciate it. Matt, go ahead and stay on the line, buddy. We'll chat after this. And you guys have a good one. We are out.